Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a genuinely fascinating political science case study. We're going to compare two absolutely historic presidential announcements. We'll see exactly how two different leaders communicated almost the exact same type of military success. And trust me, it reveals a lot about how modern political communication has shifted.
Now, to really grasp this idea of presidential rhetoric, which is basically the specific communication style, vocabulary, and tone a president uses to talk to the public and show leadership, we're going to put two very specific speeches right under the microscope. We're talking about the addresses given by Presidents Barack Obama and Donald Trump when they announced the elimination of major terrorist leaders. We'll look at Obama announcing the death of Osama bin Laden and Trump announcing the death of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi.
Think of today's Explainer as a mini political science lecture. Here is our quick syllabus. We'll be covering the art of rhetoric, framing the mission, defining the enemy, projecting national identity, and finally, the rhetorical shift. All right, let's jump straight into framing the mission and how exactly the news was broken to the public.
Right off the bat, you've got to notice the jarring difference in the opening delivery here. President Obama starts with, "The United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden." It's very formal, very institutional, right? The focus is entirely on the state's action. President Trump, on the flip side, leads immediately with a blunt, colloquial, and intensely direct declaration. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi is dead. He just completely skips the institutional buildup.
And this totally changes how they establish the why behind the mission. While Obama anchors the mission's importance in collective historical memory, referencing the searing images of 9/11 and stating we were united as one American family, Trump frames it as the ultimate strategic victory of his specific executive accomplishment, literally calling it the top national security priority of my administration. So you have collective historical memory on one hand versus specific executive accomplishment on the other. Moving on to our next section, defining the enemy, and the contrast between factual reporting versus visceral detail.
Just look at the sheer difference in descriptive language here. Obama reports the raid with this intense, factual restraint. He calmly notes that after a firefight, they killed Osama bin Laden, and goes out of his way to mention the institutional care taken to avoid civilian casualties. Trump completely flips the script. He uses highly visceral, emotional language to describe the enemy's panic, saying he died after running into a dead-end tunnel, whimpering and crying and screaming all the way.
And this totally extends to how they actually label the targets. When identifying the enemy, Obama strictly sticks to the official organizational title, calling him the leader of al-Qaeda. He keeps that objective state-level distance. Trump, though, utilizes a whole series of vivid insults and animal comparisons. He calls them savage monsters, hardcore killers, and even belittles them as frightened puppies. You see, Trump's rhetoric explicitly aims to humiliate the target. He ensures the public hears the gruesome, chaotic details of the raid, like Baghdadi dragging children to their deaths and his body being mutilated by the blast, calling him a thug who spent his last moments in total panic and dread. As a political science observer, the rhetorical goal here is crystal clear. It's the total psychological dismantling of the enemy's strongman image.
Conversely, Obama uses his description of the enemy to pivot toward a solemn institutional warning. He says, "Yet his death does not mark the end of our effort." He's reminding the public that al-Qaeda is going to continue to pursue attacks, urging vigilance at home and abroad. The rhetoric here is really designed to manage public expectations and project the image of a steady, ongoing state apparatus.
Okay, let's look at projecting national identity, meaning and conclusion. As they start to summarize the events, Obama takes deliberate care to institutionally separate the terrorists from the religion of Islam. He makes a really broad, values-based declaration about who the United States is not at war with. Trump, however, summarizes the event by heavily reinforcing the humiliation of the target, saying he died like a dog, he died like a coward, and then offers this definitive, absolute conclusion: the world is now a much safer place.
Obama is appealing to a formal sense of closure here. He emphasizes that for the families who lost loved ones to terror, justice has been done. He's basically framing the success of the mission as a reflection of American values, stating that we do these things because of who we are. It's a rhetoric of institutional righteousness.
Trump, in stark contrast, leans completely into the visceral nature of retribution. He wants the public focused intensely on the violent reality of the terrorist's demise. Baghdadi was vicious and violent, and he died in a vicious and violent way. The appeal here is much more primal. It targets a direct sense of vengeance and projects an overwhelming, unforgiving strength. But as students of political science, we can't just look at the differences. Despite their wildly different rhetorical styles, it's absolutely fascinating that both men anchored their conclusions with identical political staples. Both presidents made sure to formally thank the intelligence professionals. Both meticulously thanked the specific branches of the military. And of course, both closed their addresses with the traditional, "God bless America." It really shows that the foundation of the presidential address remains intact, even if the architecture built on top of it looks completely different.
Let's pull all this together in our final section, the rhetorical shift, bringing it back to a political science summary. When you map it out like this, you can clearly see a distinct shift from an institutional, unifying formalism to a direct, visceral populism. With Obama's approach, the tone is solemn, his vocabulary is restrained, and the focus is heavily on justice and national unity. In contrast, Trump's tone is highly populist, his vocabulary is emotional and colloquial, and his focus is squarely on the utter humiliation of the enemy to project raw strength.
So, what's the big takeaway here? Well, as impartial analysts looking at this data, we have to recognize that neither style is objectively wrong or just an accident. Not at all. Rather, they reflect highly calculated choices about how a leader believes they can best project strength and connect with their specific base in their specific era. Rhetoric is a tool, you guys, and both presidents used it to build the exact narrative they believe the country needed to hear.
As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a final thought to chew on. Given this clear shift from institutional solemnity to visceral populism, especially in today's super fast-paced, fragmented media landscape, which of these two communication styles do you think is ultimately more effective at reaching and moving the public? It's a huge question. Think about that for a bit. Thanks so much for joining me today, and keep questioning the way our world is explained to us.